Elena Reyes couldn't remember the last time she had splurged on anything for herself. Even now, as she walked through her modest three-bedroom home in the suburbs of Portland, she passed by the same couch she'd bought 15 years ago when she first started teaching. The fabric was worn in places, but it was still comfortable and served its purpose. Why replace something that worked perfectly fine? Her phone buzzed with a message. It was from her husband, Daniel. Most people knew him as Daniel Chen, the tech genius who had quietly built an empire worth billions over the last decade. But to Elena, he was just Daniel, the same slightly awkward man who had spilled coffee on her at a cafe years ago and then offered her his jacket, despite it being his only clean one for an important meeting later that day. Meeting running late. Have dinner without me. Love you, the message read. Elena sighed but smiled. This was nothing new. Daniel's work had always demanded most of his time. Many of her friends couldn't understand why she continued teaching fourth graders at Lakeview Elementary when she could be living a life of luxury and leisure. The truth was simple. She loved her job and she loved who she was when she was teaching. The kettle whistled in the kitchen. Elena poured hot water over a tea bag, watching the color swirl into the cup. Outside her window, the neighbors' kids were playing basketball in their driveway. She had grown up just like them, in a neighborhood where everyone knew everyone, where families watched out for one another. Her own childhood home had been small, but always warm and full of laughter. Her parents had taught her the value of hard work and staying true to yourself. Her father had worked at the same factory for 35 years, coming home with calloused hands but always a smile. Her mother had been a nurse who often worked double shifts but still found time to bake cookies for school fundraisers. Elena carried those lessons with her, even after meeting Daniel. When they fell in love and decided to get married, they had agreed on one thing: money would not change who they were at heart. We need separate lives, Daniel had said, not because he wanted distance, but because he understood Elena's need for independence. Your achievements should be your own, not something given to you because of who you married. And so they had settled into a life that looked ordinary from the outside. Elena continued teaching, driving her 10-year-old Honda to work each day. Her colleagues knew her husband worked in tech, but she never elaborated. She wore simple clothes, packed homemade lunches, and volunteered for school committees just like any other teacher. Only a tiny circle of people knew that Daniel Chen, who had started with a small software company, now controlled a vast network of businesses, including Global Airways, an international airline he had acquired 3 years ago when it was on the verge of bankruptcy. Elena sipped her tea and settled at the kitchen table with a stack of student papers to grade. Fourth graders had such beautiful minds, curious, honest, and wonderfully weird. Today they had written short stories about where they would go if they could fly anywhere in the world. Little Zoe wanted to visit the penguins in Antarctica. Raj had written about seeing the northern lights. Tyler wanted to fly to a planet made of candy. As she read through their adventures, Elena thought about how rarely she and Daniel traveled together these days. His schedule had grown increasingly packed as his empire expanded. She didn't blame him. She knew he was building something meaningful, creating jobs and opportunities for thousands of people. Her phone rang, pulling her from her thoughts. It was her sister. "Mom's in the hospital," her sister said, voice tight with worry. "They think it might be her heart." Elena felt her own heart drop. "How bad?" "They're running tests. The doctor said we should all come just in case." 20 minutes later, Elena had packed a small overnight bag and was booking a last-minute flight to Chicago. Her hands trembled slightly as she navigated the airline's website. Not Global Airways, as they didn't have direct flights to Chicago from Portland on short notice. She chose the earliest flight available the next morning, wincing slightly at the cost but knowing nothing mattered more than being with her family now. She called Daniel, but the call went to voicemail. He was probably still in his meeting. She left a message explaining the situation and that she'd be flying out in the morning. That night, Elena barely slept. She tossed and turned, worried about her mother and feeling strangely alone in the empty house. Daniel hadn't come home yet, not unusual when big deals were in the works. Sometimes he slept at the office or at a hotel closer to work when meetings ran late into the night. By 5 the next morning, Elena was already up, double-checking her bag and calling for a ride to the airport. Daniel still hadn't returned her call, but he had sent a text. "Just saw your message. So sorry about your mom. Let me know when you land safely. I love you. The morning air was crisp as Elena stepped outside, pulling her simple wheeled suitcase behind her. Her ride arrived promptly, a friendly older man who chatted about the weather and asked if she was going somewhere nice. Family emergency, Elena said simply. Ah, sorry to hear that. Hope everything turns out okay. At the airport, Elena joined the line of early travelers, her mind occupied with thoughts of her mother, the woman who had taught her to be strong, to stand up for herself, to never forget where she came from, now lying in a hospital bed, possibly fighting for her life. The check-in line moved slowly. Elena checked her watch, feeling the pressure of time. Finally, she reached the counter. Good morning, the airline representative said with a practiced smile. Where are you headed today? Chicago, Elena replied. My mother's in the hospital. The woman's smile softened with genuine sympathy. I'm sorry to hear that. Let me see if we can get you there as smoothly as possible. As the representative typed on her computer, Elena glanced around the busy terminal. Business people in suits rushed past with briefcases. Families herded excited children toward their gates. Airport staff in various uniforms moved with purpose through the crowds. Somewhere in the back of her mind, Elena knew that her husband owned an airline, that he had meetings with people who ran places just like this. But that knowledge felt distant and unconnected to her reality. Daniel's world and hers overlapped but remained distinct by choice. It looks like we're quite full today, the representative said, but I've assigned you a seat. Not the best location, I'm afraid. It's in the middle section toward the back. Elena nodded. That's fine. Thank you. As she moved toward security, Elena's phone buzzed with a text from her sister. Mom's stable for now. Doctor says surgery might be needed. Relief and worry battled inside her. At least her mother was stable. Elena quickened her pace, suddenly even more eager to get through security and board her flight. The security line stretched longer than expected. Elena checked the time again, feeling her anxiety rise. She would still make it, but with less time to spare than she'd hoped. She thought briefly of Daniel, who always had access to VIP lanes and private terminals when he traveled for business. But that wasn't her way. She stood patiently in line like everyone else, removed her shoes when asked, and smiled at the TSA agent checking her ID. No one looking at Elena would have guessed she was connected to wealth or power. Her clothes were simple but neat, jeans, a light sweater, and comfortable shoes for travel. Her only jewelry was her wedding ring, a surprisingly modest band that had belonged to Daniel's grandmother, chosen over the massive diamond he had initially proposed with. By the time Elena reached her gate, boarding had already begun. She joined the line, passport and boarding pass in hand, mentally preparing herself for the journey ahead and whatever news awaited her in Chicago. Little did she know that this ordinary beginning to what seemed like a routine trip would soon unfold into one of the most unexpected days of her life, a day that would reveal just how separate her world and Daniel's had truly become, and how quickly those worlds could collide. Elena clutched her boarding pass as the line inched forward. The flight to Chicago would take nearly 4 hours, and after her sleepless night, the thought of being cramped in a middle seat made her shoulders tense. Her mother's face kept appearing in her mind, strong, kind, always putting others before herself. Now she was in a hospital bed, and Elena couldn't get there fast enough. The boarding area was packed with travelers. Business people tapped away on laptops. Families tried to contain excited children, and solo travelers zoned out with headphones. Elena glanced at the separate line where first class and premium passengers boarded with ease. No waiting, no fuss. A thought crossed her mind. Maybe just this once she could ask about an upgrade. Daniel would certainly understand given the circumstances. She had never used her husband's name or connections before, but this was different. Her mother was in the hospital and she was exhausted. A more comfortable seat might help her arrive in better shape to handle whatever awaited her. Elena stepped out of line and approached the desk where a man, in his 30s with a crisp uniform and gelled hair, was organizing boarding passes. Excuse me, Elena said softly. The man, his name tag read Anthony, looked up with the practiced smile of someone who dealt with hundreds of passengers daily. Yes, how can I help you? I was wondering if there are any VIP or first-class seats available for this flight. My mother's in the hospital in Chicago, and I didn't sleep much last night. I'd be willing to pay for an upgrade. Anthony's eyes flicked over Elena's simple outfit, her well-worn jeans, sensible sneakers, and the 10-year-old jacket she'd thrown on in her rush to pack. His smile remained, but something in his expression shifted. "Let me check that for you." His fingers tapped at the keyboard, eyes on the screen. "Your name?" "Elena Reyes." More tapping. "I see you booked an economy seat this morning." Last-minute bookings usually mean limited options. "I understand," Elena nodded. "But if anything's available, I'd really appreciate—" "Actually," Anthony cut in, his voice taking on a slightly condescending tone, "all our premium seats are occupied by passengers who booked well in advance or who have elite status with our airline." He emphasized the words, elite status, as if explaining something to a child. "I see," Elena said, feeling her cheeks warm slightly. Anthony wasn't finished. "Premium seating is quite expensive, several $1,000s for this route. Many of our regular travelers save up for months for such an experience." His smile widened. "Perhaps next time you could plan further ahead. Or consider joining our rewards program. After about 30 flights, you might earn enough points for a complimentary upgrade." Elena blinked, taken aback by his patronizing tone. She could easily clarify things, mention that her husband owned an entire airline, that their home could probably fit this entire gate area inside it, that Daniel had once surprised her with a private jet for a weekend trip to Vancouver, but that wasn't who she was. "Thank you for checking," she said simply. "Of course." Anthony's attention was already shifting to the next passenger. "Enjoy your flight in economy." Elena returned to the regular boarding line, her face still warm with embarrassment. The woman behind her gave a sympathetic smile. "Don't take it personally," the woman whispered. "I've seen that guy turn down a grandmother with a cane last week. Real piece of work." Elena smiled gratefully at the stranger's kindness. "Thanks. Just worried about my mom. Hope she's okay," the woman said. The boarding process continued, and Elena eventually made her way down the jet bridge. Inside the plane, she couldn't help noticing the spacious first-class cabin as she walked past. Wide seats that reclined into beds, flight attendants offering pre-takeoff drinks, passengers already settling in with pillows and blankets. She continued toward the back, squeezing past fellow travelers who were struggling with overhead bins. Row 34, middle seat. Elena tucked her small bag under the seat in front of her and settled in between a large man already asleep against the window and a woman tapping aggressively on her phone. As the final passengers boarded, Elena closed her eyes briefly. She thought about calling Daniel again, but decided against it. He was probably still in meetings, and there wasn't anything he could do anyway. Besides, she had never been the type to run to her husband to solve her problems. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 372 to Chicago O'Hare," the captain's voice came over the intercom. "We're expecting a smooth flight today with clear skies most of the way." Elena half listened to the standard announcements as the flight attendants demonstrated safety procedures. She checked her phone one last time before switching to airplane mode. A new text from her sister. "Mom's awake and asking for you. Doctor says heart condition but treatable. Get here when you can." Relief washed over her. At least her mother was stable. Elena leaned back against the headrest as the plane began to taxi. The seats in economy were as cramped as she'd feared. Her knees nearly touched the seat in front of her, and both armrests were already claimed by her seatmates. An hour into the flight, Elena's neck had developed a crick from trying to find a comfortable position. The man beside her had begun to snore, while the woman on her other side kept sighing loudly every time the drink cart delayed her trip to the bathroom. Elena pulled out a book but found it hard to focus. Her thoughts kept returning to her mother, to the hospital room waiting at the end of this journey. She thought about Daniel too, wondering when he'd see her message, whether he'd worry. She smiled faintly, remembering how they'd met. Not at some glamorous event, as people often assumed, but at a small coffee shop where Daniel had been working on his laptop, wearing the same hoodie 3 days in a row because he was too busy coding to do laundry. He'd been nobody then, just a smart guy with big dreams and kind eyes. Now he owned companies across 3 continents. Sometimes it felt surreal, like they were living in parallel worlds that occasionally intersected. She taught 4th graders about fractions and poetry. He negotiated billion-dollar deals. She knew the names of every child in her class and their favorite colors. He knew market trends and profit margins. But at the end of the day, when it was just the two of them at home, none of that mattered. They were still the same people at heart. The drink cart finally reached her row. The flight attendant, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled into a neat bun, smiled warmly at Elena. "What can I get for you, dear?" "Just water, please." As the attendant poured the water, she studied Elena's face. "Long day?" "My mother's in the hospital," Elena explained. "Trying to get to Chicago as quickly as possible." The flight attendant's face softened with genuine concern. "I'm sorry to hear that. Anything else I can get you? Perhaps a pillow or blanket to make you more comfortable?" "That would be wonderful, thank you." A few minutes later, the attendant returned with a pillow, blanket, and a small snack box. "On the house," she whispered with a wink. This small kindness brought unexpected tears to Elena's eyes. "Thank you," she said again. The flight attendant, her name tag read Patricia, leaned closer. "I've been flying this route for 20 years. If you need anything else, just press the call button." As Patricia moved on with her cart, Elena arranged the pillow behind her neck and unfolded the blanket across her lap. It wasn't first class, but these small comforts helped. She unwrapped the snack box, finding crackers, cheese, and chocolate inside. 2 hours into the flight, Elena had finally managed to doze off when a sudden bout of turbulence jolted her awake. The plane dipped and shuddered, sending a ripple of gasps through the cabin. The seatbelt sign dinged on, and the captain's voice came over the intercom, reassuring passengers they were just passing through some rough air. Elena gripped the armrests, breathing deeply. She had never been particularly comfortable with flying, though she never admitted this to Daniel. It seemed silly when aviation was now such a big part of his business empire. As the plane continued to bounce through the turbulent air, Patricia appeared, checking that everyone had their seatbelts fastened. When she reached Elena's row, she paused. "Doing okay?" she asked quietly. Elena nodded, though her knuckles were white on the armrests. Patricia smiled reassuringly. "It's just like driving over a bumpy road," she said. "I've been through this thousands of times. We'll be through it in about 10 minutes. True to her word, the turbulence began to ease shortly after. As the seatbelt sign turned off, Elena relaxed her grip and exhaled slowly. Patricia passed by again, this time with a small cup of tea that she handed to Elena. "Chamomile," she explained. "Good for nerves. How did you know?" Elena asked, accepting the tea gratefully. Patricia chuckled. 20 years in the air, dear. You learn to read people." She lowered her voice. "Also, not everyone turns quite that shade of green during turbulence." Elena laughed, feeling the tension drain from her shoulders. As Patricia moved on, Elena sipped the tea and gazed out at the clouds visible through the small window across the aisle. Somewhere below was Chicago and her mother waiting. She never once thought about mentioning who her husband was or that he owned an airline much like this one. In Elena's mind, she was simply another passenger, one who had been shown a small kindness by a thoughtful flight attendant. She had no idea that this ordinary flight was about to become much more complicated, or that her two carefully separated worlds were about to collide in ways she could never have anticipated. The turbulence had finally settled, leaving the cabin in that strange mid-flight quietness where conversations dropped to murmurs, and the hum of the engines became a soothing background noise. Elena checked her watch, still about an hour before they would land in Chicago. She closed her eyes again, trying to rest before what would likely be a long night at the hospital. Patricia moved through the cabin, collecting trash from passengers. When she reached Elena's row, she paused, looking at her more closely. There was something familiar about this woman, something Patricia couldn't quite place. She'd seen thousands of faces in her 27 years as a flight attendant, but this one tugged at her memory. "Can I take your cup?" she asked Elena. "Oh, thank you." Elena handed over the empty teacup, offering a tired smile. Patricia's eyes widened slightly. That smile, she knew that smile. But from where? The senior flight attendant continued down the aisle, her mind working through possibilities. A regular passenger? No, she would have remembered. Someone from training? A friend of a colleague? Then it hit her. The holiday gala, Global Airways' annual celebration last December. Patricia had been invited because she'd received an award for 30 years of service across different airlines. The current CEO of Global Airways, that quiet, brilliant man, had presented the awards himself, and beside him had been his wife. This woman, Elena. not dressed in designer clothing like the other executives' wives, but in a simple black dress, genuine and warm, asking Patricia about her experiences in aviation. Patricia nearly dropped her trash bag. This was Elena Chen, wife of Daniel Chen, who had acquired Global Airways 3 years ago and turned the struggling company around. Patricia had only met her the one time, but the encounter had left an impression. Unlike many of the corporate figures she'd encountered over the years, Elena had seemed genuinely interested in the staff, asking questions about working conditions and passenger care rather than profits. And now she was here, in economy, being treated like any regular passenger. More disturbingly, Patricia remembered hearing a gate agent speaking rudely to someone before boarding. Had that been Elena? Patricia continued her duties, mind racing. Should she say something? Do something? The Chens owned the competing airline, not this one. But still, it seemed wrong to let the wife of an airline magnate sit uncomfortably in a middle seat when she was rushing to see her hospitalized mother. In the galley, Patricia whispered to her colleague, Vincent, a flight attendant who had been in the industry even longer than she had. You know, Global Airways? The competitor that was bought by that tech guy a few years back? Vincent nodded as he prepared a coffee for a passenger. Chen Technologies. Good move for them. They're actually giving us a run for our money now on international routes. His wife is in row 34, middle seat. Vincent nearly spilled the coffee. What? Why isn't she flying her own airline? Direct flight, I guess. And she didn't say anything about who she is. I only recognized her from the company gala last winter. Patricia lowered her voice further. I think Anthony was rude to her at the gate. I overheard him lecturing someone about premium seating costs. Vincent winced. Anthony had a reputation among the crew for his condescending attitude, especially toward passengers he deemed unimportant. Does the captain know? Not yet. He should, Vincent said decisively. Not to make a fuss, but professional courtesy, you know? Patricia nodded and headed toward the cockpit. Meanwhile, Elena had managed to fall into a light sleep, her head tilted awkwardly against the small pillow. The phone in her pocket vibrated, waking her. Careful not to disturb her seatmates, she slipped it out to check the message. It was from Daniel. Just heard about your mom. I'm so sorry I missed your calls. Keep me updated. Love you, Elena smiled faintly. Typical Daniel, brief but sincere. She typed back a quick response. On the plane now. Landing in Chicago in about an hour. We'll call when I get to the hospital. Up in the cockpit, Captain Mike Reynolds listened as Patricia explained the situation. You're absolutely sure it's her? He asked. Positive, Patricia replied. I spoke with her for nearly 20 minutes at the gala. She was asking about flight attendant schedules and whether we thought the rest periods were adequate. The captain rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Well, we can't exactly announce it over the intercom. Chen is our biggest competitor now. I know, Patricia agreed, but it just doesn't seem right. Her sitting back there in the middle seat when she's worried about her mother. And if Anthony was rude to her, the captain sighed. What a mess. Okay, here's what we'll do. Nothing obvious. No announcements. But see if you can make her more comfortable, and maybe find a way to get her off the plane first when we land. Patricia nodded, satisfied. Already gave her some tea in a snack box. I'll check on her again. Back in the cabin, Elena was fully awake now, anxiety about her mother returning as they got closer to Chicago. The woman beside her had finally stopped tapping on her phone and was now flipping through a magazine. The man by the window continued to snore softly. Patricia appeared beside their row. How are you doing? She asked Elena quietly. I'm okay, thank you. Elena smiled gratefully. The tea helped. Good. Patricia hesitated, then leaned in slightly. I just wanted to let you know that we'll be landing in about 40 minutes. If you'd like, given your family emergency, we could help you deplane first. Elena blinked in surprise. That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to be a bother. No bother at all, Patricia assured her. We sometimes do this for passengers with urgent connections or situations. Elena considered this. Getting to the hospital even a few minutes earlier would be worth it. Then yes, thank you. I appreciate it. As Patricia moved away, the woman next to Elena raised an eyebrow. Lucky you, she commented. I've flown this route dozens of times and never been offered early deplaning. Elena just shrugged, unsure what to say. She had no idea why the flight attendant had taken such an interest in her, but she was grateful. What Elena didn't notice was the subtle shift happening around her. Vincent passed by, offering her a fresh bottle of water. Another flight attendant happened to ask if she needed anything when walking through the aisle. The purser, who rarely left the front of the plane, made a point to walk all the way to row 34, ostensibly checking something in the emergency exit row behind her. Word had spread quietly among the veteran crew members. Not everyone knew exactly who Elena was. Some just heard she was a VIP or someone important, but they all understood. The unspoken directive to ensure she was well taken care of Elena remained oblivious, attributing the extra attention to her mentioned family emergency. She spent the remainder of the flight reviewing hospital information on her phone and texting her sister for updates. As the plane began its descent into Chicago, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our approach to Chicago O'Hare. Local time is 2:17 p.m., and the weather is partly cloudy with a temperature of 64 degrees. On behalf of myself and the entire crew, I'd like to thank you for flying with us today. We know you have choices when you fly, and we appreciate you choosing us for your journey." Was it Elena's imagination, or did the captain put slight emphasis on that last part? The landing was smooth, and as the plane taxied to the gate, Patricia appeared at Elena's row once again. "We'll be arriving at gate B17 in just a few minutes," she said. "As soon as we're parked, I'll come get you so you can be first off." "Thank you," Elena said warmly. "You've been so kind throughout this flight," Patricia smiled. "It's my pleasure. I hope your mother recovers quickly." As the seatbelt sign turned off and passengers began the usual scramble for overhead bins, Patricia returned as promised. "Ready?" Elena gathered her small bag and followed Patricia toward the front of the plane. She could feel curious glances from other passengers wondering why this ordinary-looking woman was getting special treatment. The first-class passengers seemed particularly surprised as she was led past them to the door. "Thank you again," Elena said to Patricia as they reached the front. "You've made a difficult day much easier." Patricia hesitated, then spoke quietly. "It was wonderful to see you again, Mrs. Chen. I don't know if you remember, but we met at the Global Airways Holiday Gala last year. You were very kind to ask about our working conditions." Elena's eyes widened in shock. You recognize me?" Patricia nodded with a small smile. "Your husband's airline has brought some good changes to the industry. I have friends who work there who say it's a much better place now." Before Elena could respond, the door opened, and the jet bridge was connected. Vincent appeared beside them. "Mrs. Chen, it was an honor having you on our flight today. Please let us know if there's anything else we can do to help." Stunned, Elena thanked them both and walked up the jet bridge. Her mind was reeling. They knew who she was. Had they known the whole time? Was that why they'd been so attentive? As she hurried through the terminal toward the exit, one thing became clear. Her carefully separated worlds were starting to collide, and she had no idea what would happen when Daniel found out about her experience on today's flight. Elena hurried through the bustling terminal, her mind still processing what had just happened on the plane. People recognized her, not as Elena Reyes, fourth-grade teacher, but as Mrs. Chen, wife of an airline owner. It was a strange feeling, like wearing someone else's clothes. She checked her phone as she walked, finding a new message from her sister. "Mom's stable. Doctor says we can see her in an hour. Where are you?" Elena texted back quickly, "Just landed. Getting a taxi now." Outside, the Chicago air hit her with its familiar chill. Elena had grown up here in a neighborhood about 30 minutes from the airport. The city skyline in the distance still gave her a feeling of coming home, even under these circumstances. She joined the taxi line, pulling her light jacket tighter around herself. The line moved quickly, and soon she was sliding into the back seat of a yellow cab. "Northwestern Memorial Hospital, please," she told the driver. As the taxi merged into traffic, Elena leaned her head against the window, watching the city flow past. Her mind drifted to Daniel. Should she tell him about what happened on the flight? About being recognized? They had worked so hard to keep their lives separate. Daniel had always respected her desire for normalcy, for earning things on her own merit. It was one of the things she loved most about him. The cab pulled up to the hospital entrance 40 minutes later. Elena paid the driver and hurried inside, following signs to the cardiac care unit. Her sister was waiting in the hallway, looking tired but relieved. "How is she?" Elena asked, hugging her sister tightly. "Better. They're saying it was a minor heart attack. She'll need some lifestyle changes, maybe medication." but the doctor thinks she'll recover fully. Elena felt tears of relief spring to her eyes. Can we see her? In a bit. The doctor's with her now. They sat in the waiting area, catching up in hushed tones. Elena's sister filled her in on the details. How their mother had felt chest pain while gardening. How a neighbor had driven her to the hospital. How the doctors had acted quickly. So, her sister said after a while, how did you get here so fast? I thought you wouldn't arrive until later this evening. I got an earlier flight, Elena explained, not mentioning the special treatment at the end. Some things were still easier to keep to herself. A doctor approached them, clipboard in hand. Family of Rose Reyes. Both women stood up. Your mother is doing well, the doctor said with a reassuring smile. We've stabilized her condition. The heart attack was mild, but it's still a warning sign that changes are needed. You can see her now, but try not to stay too long. She needs rest. They followed the doctor down the hallway to a private room. Their mother looked small in the hospital bed, with monitors beeping softly beside her and an IV in her arm. But her eyes were open and she smiled when she saw them. My girls, she said, her voice weak but warm. You didn't need to come running. Of course we did, Elena said, moving to her mother's side and taking her hand gently. You scared us. Nonsense. It takes more than a little heart hiccup to keep me down. Her mother's spirit was still strong even if her body was temporarily weakened. They spent the next hour talking quietly with their mother. The doctor had advised against discussing anything stressful, so they kept the conversation light. Neighborhood gossip, Elena's students, funny stories from their childhood. As the afternoon wore on, Elena's mother began to tire. Her eyelids drooped, and her responses became slower. We should let you rest, Elena's sister said, noticing the fatigue. Their mother didn't protest, which told them how tired she really was. Come back tomorrow, she murmured. Both of you, they promised they would, each kissing her forehead before stepping out into the hallway. She looks better than I expected, Elena admitted as they walked toward the elevator. The doctors say she's tough. Must be where we get it from, Elena smiled. Definitely. Are you staying at a hotel? Her sister asked as they reached the main lobby. I haven't booked anything yet. Everything happened so fast. Maybe I'll find something nearby. You could stay with me, but with the kids and the dog, it's chaos. Not exactly restful. I'll find a hotel, Elena assured her. I'll text you the details once I'm settled. They hugged goodbye in front of the hospital, promising to meet back there the following morning. As Elena turned to look for a taxi, she froze. Standing by a black car parked at the curb was Daniel. For a moment, she thought she was hallucinating from exhaustion. But no, it was definitely her husband, looking concerned and slightly out of place in his casual business attire. He hadn't seen her yet. He was looking down at his phone, probably checking if he had the right entrance. Daniel, she called. He looked up, his face breaking into relief when he saw her. Elena. They met halfway, embracing tightly. Elena buried her face against his shoulder, suddenly aware of how much tension she'd been carrying all day. What are you doing here? She asked when they finally pulled apart. How did you even know which hospital? Daniel's expression was a mix of concern and sheepishness. I tracked your phone. I hope that's okay. When I got your message about your mom, I cleared my schedule and took the company jet. I landed about 30 minutes ago. Elena felt a wave of affection for this man who would drop everything and fly across the country for her. Of course it's okay. I'm just surprised. How's your mother? She's going to be fine, Elena said, the relief evident in her voice. It was a mild heart attack. She's already ordering the nurses around. Daniel laughed softly. That sounds like her. He looked at Elena more carefully, noting the exhaustion in her eyes. And how are you? Was your flight okay? Elena hesitated. It was interesting. I'll tell you about it later. I need to find a hotel first. Already taken care of. I booked a suite at the lakefront. It's only 10 minutes from here. Of course he had. Daniel was always thinking ahead, always solving problems before they arose. It was what made him such a successful businessman. Sometimes it frustrated Elena, her need for independence clashing with his need to provide. But today, she was simply grateful. They got into the waiting car, Daniel giving the driver instructions to take them to the hotel. As they settled into the back seat, Elena leaned against him, feeling the day's events catching up with her. I'm glad you're here, she admitted quietly. Daniel kissed the top of her head. Always. The drive to the hotel was short. Elena was so tired she barely registered the grand lobby as they passed through to the elevators. The suite Daniel had booked was on the top floor, spacious, elegant, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. "You should rest," Daniel said, setting her small suitcase in the bedroom. "I'll order some food." Elena nodded gratefully and headed for the shower. The hot water helped wash away some of the travel grime and hospital stress. By the time she emerged in the hotel's plush bathrobe, room service had arrived with a selection of her favorite foods. They ate by the window, watching the city lights come on as dusk settled over Chicago. Elena finally told Daniel about her flight experience, the gate agent's condescending attitude, the uncomfortable middle seat, and the flight attendant who had recognized her. Daniel's expression darkened when she described how Anthony had spoken to her. He said what? That you should save up for a premium seat? It wasn't a big deal, Elena said, though her cheeks still burned at the memory. He didn't know who I was. Nobody was supposed to know. That's not the point, Daniel insisted. No passenger should be treated that way regardless of who they are or what ticket they've purchased. Elena reached for his hand. It's okay. The flight attendants were lovely, especially after they realized who I was. Daniel shook his head. I'm going to say something to their executive team. Not about you specifically, but about passenger treatment in general. It's unacceptable. Elena knew that tone. Daniel rarely got angry, but when he did, his quiet determination was more powerful than any shouting. Let's worry about it tomorrow, she suggested. Right now, I just want to sleep. Daniel nodded, letting it go for the moment. They finished their meal in comfortable silence, then prepared for bed. Elena was asleep almost before her head hit the pillow, exhausted from the emotional day. She didn't know that while she slept, Daniel was making calls and sending emails. He didn't mention his wife or her experience specifically, but he did request a meeting with the airline's customer service director for the following day. And he definitely didn't know that Anthony, the gate agent, had been summoned to that same meeting, completely unaware that his condescending attitude toward a simple-looking woman in jeans was about to bring him face to face with one of the most powerful men in the airline. Industry morning light filtered through the hotel curtains, waking Elena gently. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was or why. Then it all came flooding back. Her mother. The hospital. Daniel's surprise arrival. Speaking of Daniel, she reached across the bed only to find his side empty. She sat up, blinking away sleep, and spotted a note on his pillow. Gone to a quick meeting. Back by 9:30. Breakfast ordered for 9. Love you. Elena checked the clock. 8:47. She stretched and padded to the bathroom. After freshening up, she returned to find room service wheeling in a cart laden with fresh fruit, pastries, and coffee. Perfect timing. She thanked the server and settled by the window with her coffee, watching the morning sun glitter across Lake Michigan. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. Mom had a good night. Doctor doing rounds at 10:30 if you want to be there. Elena replied that she'd be there, then sat quietly, enjoying this moment of peace before another emotional day. She wondered what meeting Daniel had gone to so early. Probably something to do with his business, though he'd promised to clear his schedule while they were here. At precisely 9:30, she heard the hotel room door open. Morning, Daniel called, his voice tight in a way Elena recognized immediately. Something had upset him. In here, she replied. Everything okay? Daniel appeared in the doorway of the sitting area, still in his business casual attire from yesterday, but with his tie loosened and a tent set to his shoulders. Just finished the most interesting meeting of my month, he said, pouring himself a coffee before joining her by the window. With the customer service director of the airline you flew yesterday. Elena's stomach dropped. Daniel, you didn't. I did. He sipped his coffee, eyes fixed on the view. And the gate manager. And Anthony. Oh no. Elena set her cup down, suddenly not hungry. Please tell me you didn't embarrass that poor man. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Poor man? The one who told my wife to save up for a decent seat when her mother was in the hospital? He didn't know who I was, Elena insisted. That was the whole point. Which is exactly why it matters, Daniel countered. He should treat every passenger with respect, not just the ones he thinks are important. Elena sighed. What did you do to him? Daniel's expression softened. Nothing you wouldn't approve of, I promise. Tell me, she pressed. I met with the customer service team as the CEO of a competitor interested in their passenger care protocols. Perfectly normal business meeting. Daniel's voice was calm, but there was a hint of satisfaction in it. I asked them to walk me through their training, particularly for handling passengers with family emergencies. Then I had them role-play a scenario, a woman requesting an upgrade because her mother was in the hospital. Elena covered her face with her hands, both embarrassed and curious. And? Anthony volunteered to demonstrate how he'd handle it. Confident guy. Daniel's mouth quirked. He proceeded to give the exact same condescending speech he gave you, about premium experiences requiring planning and saving, suggesting the passenger might want to start a rewards account for future travel. Oh God. Elena peeked through her fingers. Then what? The customer service director looked horrified. Apparently, that's not actually their policy. Daniel took another sip of coffee. Then I asked Anthony if he'd ever considered that the passenger might have been able to afford the seat, but simply hadn't mentioned it, or that she might have connections he was unaware of. You didn't tell them about me, did you? Helena asked, no names. But I did mention that the passenger he'd lectured was married to the CEO of a competing airline. Daniel couldn't suppress a small smile. His face went white so fast I thought he might faint. Elena shook her head, torn between mortification and amusement. So you humiliated him? I educated him, Daniel corrected. And then I did something you'll approve of, which was, I told them I wasn't interested in getting anyone fired, that everyone deserves a chance to learn and improve. Daniel reached for her hand. I suggested they might want to implement better training on empathy and customer care, particularly for passengers facing emergencies. And I offered to share some materials from our empathy training program at Global. Elena blinked in surprise. The program I helped develop? The very one. Daniel squeezed her hand. I told them my wife, no names, had designed a training module specifically around recognizing and supporting passengers in difficult situations, and that it had improved our customer satisfaction scores significantly. A warm feeling spread through Elena's chest. Her work mattered, even though she'd kept it separate from her teaching career. The program she'd created was making a difference, and Daniel was proud enough of it to share it with competitors. What did they say? She asked. They were very interested. The director asked if we could arrange a formal consultation. Daniel looked genuinely pleased. It could be the beginning of an industry-wide improvement in how airlines handle passengers in crisis. All because you were too humble to name-drop when that gate agent was rude to you. Elena felt a complex mix of emotions, embarrassment, pride, and something else she couldn't quite name. For years, she'd worked so hard to keep her two worlds separate. Elena Reyes, the teacher, and Mrs. Chen, the airline owner's wife. But maybe those worlds didn't have to be so completely divided. So Anthony isn't fired? She asked. No. But he is being reassigned to the training department for 3 months to help implement the new empathy protocols. Daniel's eyes twinkled. And he'll be the first to go through the new training as a participant. Elena laughed despite herself. That seems fair. He actually thanked me, believe it or not. Said it was a wake-up call he needed. Daniel shrugged. People can surprise you. They finished breakfast quietly, then prepared to head to the hospital. As they rode the elevator down to the lobby, Elena felt Daniel watching her. What? She asked. I've been thinking, he said carefully. Maybe it's time we reconsidered some of our boundaries. Elena tensed slightly. What do you mean? I respect your independence. I always have. It's one of the things I love most about you. He took her hand. But I'm proud of who you are and what you contribute, both as a teacher and through your work with Global. Maybe we don't need to keep everything so separate anymore. The elevator doors opened to the opulent lobby. Elena stepped out, considering his words as they walked toward the hotel entrance. Outside, their driver waited with the car. I don't want special treatment just because I'm your wife, she said finally as they settled into the back seat. I know that, but there's a difference between leveraging connections and simply acknowledging them. Daniel's voice was gentle. You've accomplished so much on your own merit. No one who knows you would ever think otherwise. Elena gazed out the window as they drove toward the hospital. Chicago flowed past, the city where she'd grown up, where her mother had taught her to stand on her own 2 feet. I'll think about it, she promised. At the hospital, they found Elena's mother sitting up in bed. Color returned to her cheeks. Arguing with a nurse about her breakfast. I've been eating bacon for 70 years, she was saying. It hasn't killed me yet. Mom, Elena interrupted, relieved to see her mother's spirit returning. Maybe listen to the medical professionals? Her mother harumphed but stopped arguing. There's my favorite son-in-law, she said, noticing Daniel. Come to spring me from this place. Daniel laughed. Not until the doctors say it's safe. He bent to kiss her cheek. But I did bring you something. He pulled a small box from his pocket, her favorite chocolates, from a local Chicago shop. Don't tell the nurses, he whispered conspiratorially, Elena. Watch them with a full heart. This was her family, her straightforward, no-nonsense mother, her brilliant, kind husband, two parts of her life that had always been connected, even as she tried to keep other aspects separate. Later that evening, after the doctors had given them good news about her mother's recovery timeline, Elena and Daniel walked through the hospital garden, getting some fresh air. I've decided, Elena said suddenly. About? I'll help with the empathy training program for the other airline. As myself, both Elena Reyes and Mrs. Chen. She smiled up at him. I can be both, can't I? Daniel wrapped his arm around her shoulders. You always have been. That's what makes you extraordinary. As they headed back inside, Elena's phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Patricia, the flight attendant who had recognized her. Mrs. Chen, it read, I hope your mother is recovering well. I wanted to let you know that our airline is implementing new training procedures for all customer-facing staff, focusing on empathy and care during passenger emergencies. Your husband mentioned you might be willing to consult on this project. I can't think of anyone better qualified. Wishing you and your family all the best, Patricia. Elena showed the email to Daniel, who raised his eyebrows innocently. I might have mentioned to the customer service director that Patricia handled the situation exceptionally well. Elena laughed and shook her head. You're impossible. I prefer strategic, he corrected with a smile. As they re-entered the hospital, Elena felt a new sense of peace. The boundaries between her worlds might be blurring, but perhaps that wasn't such a bad thing after all. She was still the same person, a teacher, a daughter, a wife, no matter which name she used. And if her experience led to better treatment for other passengers in difficult situations, then maybe Anthony turning her away from that VIP seat had been a blessing in disguise.